All right, good morning, everyone. Looks like everybody's kind of coming in and getting situated. Thanks for being here on a beautiful Sunday morning. So grateful to have everybody show up. I'm sure there are a few traveling today in other spots, and we might have a few visitors here today. So welcome if you are visiting with us. I wanted to start by saying a couple of things about by way of announcement. I didn't get a chance to get it in the bulletin, but we're starting, as you saw in the ministry meeting, for the youth ministry, we're starting a new thing called Guys Night Out. So Guys Night Out. However, it's not just for the youth. As we talked around, can you turn me down just a little bit, guys? As we talked around, everybody thought it was such a good idea. I think we're going to invite some of the younger at heart men. So if you are of the male persuasion, you're invited. So Friday night, the 21st, we've rented the pickleball courts that are down here, and we're going to come together and play pickleball for an hour or two. And then after that, we're going to come back to the building for a devotional that's going to be talking about things that affect young men. So if you are young at heart and you still want to come to that, you're welcome to give some wisdom to the young men who will be there, who might be able to listen to you for the things that you might be able to help them with. So Guys Night Out, 21st of April, it's Friday night, playing some pickleball. So, all right, so as we get going, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. Dear Father, we're so grateful that we have this time to come and to learn more about you, your word, who you are, your creative power, and God, all the evidence that you have put down to show us who you are. God, thank you that you have made us in a way that we are curious about you. You have made in our heart a God-shaped hole that continues to push us to seek you and to know who you are. We know that so many do, and God, we know that we have the truth here that has been laid down in your word. And we just ask that we continue to know it ever more and to be able to express it in ways that that will be challenging for them, but also can convince them that you are real and that you have a plan for them in their lives and you have given them a path to salvation. God, we just ask that in all that we say and do, we do it in a way that's pleasing unto you and according to your pattern. We love you for all that you have done. You have given us so much through Jesus Christ, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. We're going to start this morning by reading Psalm 139, just a few verses there as we talk. The main question we're going to be trying to answer today is, where did man come from? And I think in this room, we pretty much have the answer already, right? But how do you share that with those who don't necessarily believe? But I want to just contrast the idea, of evolution with the greatness of God's creation, just as we begin. So Psalm 139, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my laying down, and are intimately acquainted with all of my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You have enclosed me behind and before, and laid your hands upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain to it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will lay a hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even the darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are all alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and in your book were all written the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of them. I just wanted to contrast that with this whole idea of evolution. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fossil record today. There'll be a lot of facts here about the fossil record, but in the end, I just want to contrast that. Isn't it great when you read this psalm that you know the Lord both knows every intricate detail of your life? That there is a God that cares for you, right? From before when you were born to the time that you die, He has provided everything you need, and especially for salvation, right? That is so hopeful. That is such a wonderful a thought to keep in your heart, to know that there is a God and He cares for you that much. Contrast that with evolution. There's nothing. Nobody cares for you. You're an accident. You have just shown up out of nowhere, and nobody cares anything about you. If you were to die, then you're not the fittest of the species, right? I don't know how people who espouse to the evolutionary thought process have hope to live life, right? I don't know where or how they could have hope, but I just wanted to really kind of talk a little bit about that before we jump into a bunch of facts, because that's really why we're here, right? Because God made us. I don't even know if I understand fully what verse 16 says. I give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I understand the wonderfully made, but I don't understand the fearfully. If somebody wants to enlighten me at some point, go ahead and do that. But as I read that, I'm not even sure I know what that means 100%, right? And that's what God has done for us, right? He has done so much for us, the way He's made us and everything He's done. So where did man come from? Right? The Genesis account says that man was created on the sixth day, right? Is that true? Right? Is he fearfully and wonderfully made, like the psalmist here says? Or did evolution bring about by this random accident everything that we see? So we're going to go through some evidence today from the fossil record, okay? We have already seen, as we have continued to study, that if you look at the DNA and all the information contained in DNA, that evolution is not possible, right? We've seen from astronomy and from the laws of thermodynamics that the Big Bang is not possible, right? And so we've been just knocking off argument by argument by argument, right? Today we're going to knock off the argument about these so-called missing links, right? Where are the missing links, right? Have you heard about people finding the missing links, right? I'm going to show you from basically back in the late 1800s all the way through today. They keep espousing, yeah, we found it. We found the missing link, right? Well, actually the entire chain is gone, but they keep saying we found the missing link. Here's in the fossil record the proof that there are transitionary forms, right? And we're going to go and we're going to look what that and see what the evidence actually really shows. By the way, a disclaimer: if you have your book, we're in chapters, I think, 12 and 13, and I'm going to stay very, very close to the book today because this is not necessarily my realm of expertise, and so most of what you are going to get today is either directly out of the book or very, very close to what's coming out of the book. So you're not going to get a ton of new information here if you're already reading the book, but I wanted to just bring some thoughts forward as we study. Okay, so what does the evidence really show? Has a missing link really been found? What about all the reports of the archaeological evidence for early evolutionary man, right? They come out every few years, right? On websites, on magazines and articles, in textbooks. They're all out. Here, we found the next, here's the missing link, right? And we found that. So, with the frequency, all of this is coming forth, right? Isn't it obvious then that science prevails and that man really truly evolved? Okay, we're gonna really kind of delve into this. Okay, so don't underestimate this phrase, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? And so when you see a picture, what immediately kind of comes to mind is some credibility, okay? But what I want to kind of get across to you today is most of what has happened with the fossil record is they find a very small piece of a fossil or a very limited amount of a skeleton, and then most of the time what happens is artists then render what they think that particular find would have looked like, okay? And that can be very convincing, right? Oh, they found this Neanderthal man, right? And then you look into it, and basically what they find is, like a piece of a skull cap and a tooth, right? And from a piece of a skull cap and a tooth, then the artist has rendered this whole picture that makes you think that the evidence is super solid for finding this whole skeleton, right? This whole fossil that was a Neanderthal man, right? But when you look at the actual evidence, what you find is that you found not even enough really to reproduce it, okay? So we will, I want you to keep that in mind as we look at the facts here. Okay, so as we look at those evidences, you're never told that, right? We will go through a number of the missing links, the fossil records here, but many of them have been discredited or have been proven as hoaxes through the years. And why might that be, based upon everything we've studied in this class? That's what they want it to be, right? There's obviously some bias, right? These people are spending their lives going and digging for things they already want to find, right? Again, we talked about how most times scientists are not dispassionate, out just trying to find what the truth is. Many of them have the idea already, and they're trying to find the evidence that proves their truth, right? And it's no different for paleontologists and archaeologists, right? And so there have been times, and we'll see a couple today, that they wanted it to be so true that they made up their own evidence, okay? All right, so the first one is Nebraska Man. Okay, Nebraska Man was featured on the front cover of the Illustrated London News in 1922 from the June 24th edition, and there was an artist's interpretation of a man and a woman, right? And so here's a transitional man and a woman that they found from the fossil record. Okay, so what was the evidence? They found a single tooth. It was recovered by Henry Osborne, who was the head of the vertebrate paleontology department of New York's American Museum of Natural History. Okay, so they found a tooth, and from a tooth, the artist rendered both a man and a woman, okay, of some sort of transitional form. Okay, that was in 1922. So what they found was, after much controversy, they went out and they searched the site for some more evidence. And that original site was in Snake Creek. And it was concluded just a few years later that the tooth belonged to an extinct species of wild pig. Okay? So they go out, and then as they have the ability to find more evidence, and in this particular case they did, that's what they found, and it was just a tooth of a pig, okay? And Dwayne Gish, noted creationist, said, "It was the first time a pig made a monkey out of an evolutionist." I really like that line. I had to throw that in there. Absolutely, right? And so they come out, and this is what happens over and over, right? The evidence that they have, the single tooth, is blasted at the public in a way that looks credible. These artist renditions or whatever come out and say, okay, this is what we found, right? This is the man and a woman, and here are the transitionalized forms, right, from one tooth. And really, in the end, they found out that even the one tooth had nothing to do with human evolution. It was really just an extinct pig. Okay, Piltdown Man. So another acclaimed missing link, a potential missing link. And for 40 years, it was touted as this is the missing link, right? Because of the evidence, right? It was found in Piltdown, England. And evolutionists of the time, you recognize probably from previous weeks the name Sir Arthur Keith. He wrote the foreword to Charles Darwin's Origin, right? The 100th anniversary edition. He wrote the foreword to that. Very noted evolutionists, Sir Arthur Woodward, Grafton Elliott Smith, all well-proclaimed scientists at the time, they all said, this is right, this is genuine, this is evidence that can be trusted, okay? It was a complete fraud, 100% complete fraud. So what happened was they found a jawbone of an orangutan and a human skull in different places, and what they did is they brought them together and said that they were found together. It wasn't the truth. They took the jawbone and they filed down the teeth to make it fit with the human skull. So they took the evidence and they basically changed it, right, to fit their conclusions. And they dipped it in acid to give it an old look, or to give it a little bit more credibility as something that they pulled out of the ground, right? And so they did all of this. They found it about 40 years later that it was a complete hoax and a complete fraud, right? They wanted to find this evidence so badly that they were willing to create it themselves, okay? So that's kind of what we're dealing with here, and I wanted to make sure that people kind of understand the nature of how much they want to prove their theory. They're willing to lie, right? They're willing to commit fraud, right? And even some of the more accredited scientists at the time can't even 100% spot the difference, okay? All right. Okay, what about Neanderthal man, right? Now, we've all heard about Neanderthals, right? So where did this come from? What is Neanderthal man, and why was it a missing link? Okay, it's one of the most well-known of all the quote-unquote missing links, but many are unaware that Dr. Cave at the International Congress of Zoology in 1958 did an examination of the skeleton, and the result with this the skeleton was just a man that suffered from arthritis. Okay, this was also found in England, and at the time they didn't always understand the nature of getting enough vitamin D, right, and enough vitamin C. And what happened was, for a lot of Europeans, especially Northern Europeans, many of them had a lot of diseases. So when they found the skeleton, it was very old looking. And they thought, so much so that they thought maybe this was a transitional form. But really, it was just a very, very diseased human, right? And so Dr. Kuzo, who was another evolutionist, actually looked at this and said, you must understand the skull really cries out disease. The teeth are badly decayed. The bones of the vault of the skull are extremely thick. And there are many features that testify of acromegaly or excess excretion of growth hormone in adulthood. So what did you find? You found something that didn't look very human, okay? But it wasn't that it was some sort of transitional form or some old fossil. It was just that the person had really lived a very difficult life, okay? And so much so that it didn't look quite human. Okay, all right, what about Java man? Okay, so Java man, again, held up when it was found as a missing link, right? It was a discovery made by the Dutch autonomist Eugene de Boy in 1890 at the banks of the Solo River near the village in Trinil. Okay, this is down, I believe, in Africa. 3 fossilized bone fragments were found: the skull cap, the tooth, the femur, and then later at another location not far from there, another tooth. Okay. The find was named Anthropopithecus erectus, right? And you've probably heard this that kind of term before, right? But really what that means, just it's an erect, walking, human-like anthropod. Okay, that's all that means. So when it comes to Java man, did we find? We found that 35 years later that all of the pieces that they thought were one find were actually not. The skull cap was of a monkey, and as we continued to look at it, we found that the femur bone that was found there was actually a human bone, a modern human bone, right? So do you kind of see what's happening here? There is these finds, and many times what happens is they're taking bones that are in a generic area and attributing them to one find or one skeleton or one fossil, but many times it's not the case. And now as we have more and more ability to research this and look at DNA of the actual fossil or of the bone fragment, we're finding that these things are not related like they're claimed to be, right? So that's a big thing. Okay. All right. So I want to stop and I'm going to pause here because this is probably the most famous of all the finds, okay? Australopithecus afarenus, okay? Lucy, okay? Now, the reason why Lucy is such a big deal to evolutionists is when Lucy was found, it wasn't just these, skull cap here, a tooth there, a toe bone there kind of thing that we find. By the way, in the book, they also talk about Rhodesian man and a couple of others, so I'm going to refer you to your book to get some more information on those, okay? But Lucy is a famous, very famous one, and we'll talk about her just a little bit. So why they tout Lucy as such a great find is that they found 40% of her, okay? And so almost all the rib cage, some of the arm, a little bit of the legs, right, were found. And so 40% of the skeleton was recovered in the same location, and they were obviously part of the same skeleton, okay? And so when they look at that, they're like, oh, we've got it now, right? Because of all these other things that we've seen, we've got it now, okay? But upon closer examination, you start to find that there are actually problems even with Lucy, okay? So 1974, Donald Johansen and Tom Gray was a head research student under Donald's tutelage. They basically were out there and they were trying to find evidence, and they ended up going to this, what was called Locality 162 there in Hadar, Ethiopia. Okay, and then they started digging. Does anybody know where Lucy got her name? Yeah. Yes. That was what was playing in the camp that night when they made the find, right? That should tell you something a little bit about the expedition. But anyway. But that's where she got her name. And it's a lot easier to say than Australopithecus afarenus. So Lucy is yes, exactly. So they went out and they actually found this skeleton, right? And it was 40% complete. And the meaning of all of that is the name is the southern ape from Ethiopia's Afar Depression in northeast Ethiopia, right? But if you give it a nice scientific-sounding name, then it gives you more credibility. So that's why it's called Australopithecus afarenus. But okay, so what are some issues with Lucy? Okay, they have examined Lucy over and over, and there are a lot of issues with her being a transitionalized fossil or humanoid. Okay, and we're going to talk about it. So, all right, so she has curved fingers and ape-like limb proportions. So, one of the things they did not find in the 40% is they did not find any of the hands or feet. Okay, so they didn't find any hands or feet bones, just basically rib cage and one side down to the leg, almost to the knee. Okay, and so what they found when they started looking more closely at the fossilized remains, right, that she did have. We did have some fingers there. Sorry, I misspoke. That she has curved fingers and ape-like limb proportions. So what that means is, if you were to compare her fingers to humans typically have very straight types of phalanges, right, and straight types of bones in their hands, right, with the phalanges and all the fingers, and so they're made better for kind of gripping. Right, but typically apes and gibbons, orangutans, if you look at their hands, most of their hands are shaped much more curved, okay? And why is that typically? You're grabbing onto tree limbs, right? And so they're used to gripping and holding their entire weight, and their skeletons are made such that they can do that much easier. I don't know if any of you have tried to hang from a bar while you're training for a Spartan race, but very difficult for humans to hang from anything for very long, right? If you can hang from something for over a minute, you're doing pretty good, right? But apes have to basically survive by getting up into trees and getting what they need to survive up there. And so obviously God made them with the right kinds of skeleton and proportions and appendages that they can actually do that, right? So when some of her finger bones and stuff were found, what they found is that they were very much ape-like, okay? Very much ape-like, and had the ability to support her as she climbed in a tree, okay? She has locking wrists, okay? What that means is that's much more a trait of a quadruped, right? So we're bipeds because we walk upright on two legs, right? And quadrupeds typically will have locking wrists, okay? Why that is many times they use their front arms as a way to propel themselves, right? And so the anatomy of an ape typically, or a quadruped, is such that they propel themselves there. So what they need is extra strength in their arms and wrists to be able to support their entire weight, okay? When they looked at Lucy's wrists, that's what they found, that they were locking, okay? She had micro wear on her teeth, and that typically is a good indication that she was a tree fruit eater, okay? So like an ape or a monkey of some sort, they got a lot of their food from trees or tall trees, and so she had the exact same kinds of characteristics when they looked at the wear on her teeth, right? And it kind of proved that she was a fruit eater. Okay, this is really important. So the rib cage that they found is conical like an ape's, but not barrel-shaped like a human's. So if you read kind of the book itself, and it kind of goes into a little bit of how when they went to put Lucy back together, that they tried to put her rib cage back into a conical shape, but it didn't fit very well. A barrel shape, sorry, a human shape, like a barrel shape, but it didn't fit very well. And so what they did is they started looking at, well, what does that mean? So then the person kind of reassembling that said, you know what, it really kind of fits much more like a conical shape, like an ape, than it really does like a human shape, okay? That's the conclusion, right, exactly. So as you continue to look at the different problems that you have with Lucy, you see that there are many problems, okay? So the last one is she Lucy, or should she be maybe called Lucifer, right? And so as they have examined the pelvis of the find, what they have seen is that the pelvis is too small to be able to give birth. Okay, so Lucy is more likely Lucifer, or a male and not a female. Okay, so just because the song was playing that night and they named her Lucy doesn't mean she was actually female, right, as everybody refers to her as. She was more likely probably male. They know that, again, from the way that the pelvis is constructed. The reason why that's important is the size of the specimen. Okay, so typically the female of the species is a little smaller generally than the male. And that you see that actually in apes and typically humans as well. And because of that, what you see is that if Lucy is actually Lucifer, the size of him would indicate that the female would be smaller and be much more actually aped size, right? That's why it's important for her to be female, is that if she is that size, then obviously the male is a little bit bigger, and she's a lot larger than today's size ape, right? Does that make sense? So if she is actually a he, then it somewhat disproves the fact that that this is some sort of transitional form, because she would be very similar sized to a modern day ape. Okay, so. Thank you for the conclusion. The conclusion is that she is just an ape. She's not human. She's not on the tree, the humanoid tree, right? She's not transitional. She's just a really old fossilized ape. Okay. Questions about that? I'm not sure whether I can answer them or not, but let's just talk about it for a minute. Any questions about that? Because when I said Lucy, a number of people shook their head like, "That's we've heard about Lucy, right?" So I'll see if I can answer them. Maybe not.
No question, just comment. Emma was just discussing with me over here that she, last year, so she's in 8th grade now, 7th grade, they went through this, Lucy, and some of this other evolutionary stuff. And she was just making the comment that we didn't go through any of that stuff. It was just all the stuff that goes against what you're saying. So
Yeah.
just need a comment from her.
And that's the way it's always presented. It's always presented like, here are the absolute facts, and these are unquestionable facts, and don't look at the evidence, right? And the opposite side is never presented, right? But it's absolutely true. As you look into it, even slightly, you see that there's a lot of reason to believe that she has nothing to do with human evolution. It's just an ape. So.
When we're talking about this, and Emma in particular, we're talking 7th graders going through
Yeah.
this, a respected teacher that is instructing them in this, so their believability has to be right in line with that.
Yeah.
And so now we're pitting their teacher who we are telling them to trust and believe against what we are telling them as parents to trust and believe, what the
Yeah.
Bible says to trust and believe. There's a lot of confusion there. We're expecting a 12 and 11-year-old to parse through on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. It will continue to get more and more overt, I think, and more in your face, because, again, it's about perspective. We have the same evidence, but we come at it from a different viewpoint, which is why we started this class this way. I'm going to give you a quote here pretty soon, that even the finder of Lucy had to say that bias plays in, right? So I'll give you that here in a minute. But absolutely, it's always presented as absolute, undisputable fact when it's not the case. Yes? Yes, do not quote me on this, go to the book, but I believe they have her at like 3 million years old or something like that, between 3 and 6 million years old. And so, I think so. I believe that they believe that she is much closer. They thought she was much more human than many of the other finds, and so they dated her that way, right? And actually, if I remember reading correctly, I have a couple different sources. I was reading this book, but then Brad has another book called The Truth About Human Origins, and he goes in a lot more detail. And I believe, if I remember correctly, they don't like the fact that there's a number of things about Lucy that are out of order in the evolutionary scale, right? And so even within their own ranks, Lucy causes problems for them as well, because she shouldn't have had, quote unquote, these traits at 3 million years ago or whatever. So there's a lot of things that disproved inside their own theory. So anyway, there's a lot of controversy over Lucy. So, yeah, yes. Oh, yeah, back here, sorry. Did I see a hand up?
What I find so funny is all these missing links are more highly evolved than a lot of these apes. And according to evolution, they should have still be alive today, considering they're more highly evolved and more adapted. So
Yes.
they should have gone extinct.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, that's the irony, and we'll look at that kind of coming up in the next couple of weeks. That's the irony. There are some, quote-unquote, more advantageous characteristics of certain animal groups or certain low-level life forms that, if evolution were true, we should all be doing that. So like being asexual. Right? It's a much better advantage for life and for living than being sexual, right? So if there's anything in the quote-unquote tree that is asexual, why would it ever move back to being sexual? Because at some point, it's significantly harder to perpetuate the species having to have two instead of just one, right? It doesn't make sense. So it's exactly the same thing that you're saying. So super good comment. Thank you. Did I see another hand? Yeah.
Just had a comment too. I think, if I remember right, the finder of Lucy was in his last week or two, and he was running out of funding. And so his find worked out very well for him financially, because like I said, he was moving out.
Yeah. By the way, that's a good point. So by the way, every one of these fines, all the ones, even the ones that were frauds, made their finders very famous. Very famous, right? Yes, they were the ones who made all these discoveries, and there's always this push to find these things or to see things that maybe aren't there because of what it means for them, either personally, professionally, financially, right? There are motivations beyond just even their own beliefs that make them want to find a lot of these things, right? And again, I have a couple comments here coming up around that. So in the end, as we continue to look at this, what you don't see anywhere, and I've only talked about human origins here. I haven't talked about anything else, right? These are all missing links. It's supposed to be in man's, fossil record, in man's, genetic tree. But there's a ton of research that has been done, for the last 150 to 200 years, and a ton of digging in the dirt. You know what they haven't found? Any transitional fossils of any species. Right? That's why I said there's a missing chain, right? Right. Yes, and you don't see that. What you do see in the fossil record is you see minor adaptations from the things that you see today, like you just said, right? That's what you see in the fossil record, right? And so this whole idea of a missing link is a misnomer because the whole chain is not there, right? We don't find transitional forms.